of publications. It's a special anniversary issue. Soul of the South, and this is the April-May 2017 edition of Garden and Gun. And we're just going to look through here. There are a few little things that I would like to read. One thing in particular, they have an article in here about steel magnolias, which, if you're familiar with the movie, it's an interesting little article. I've actually not read all of it. I kind of skimmed it and then thought I would just wait until we were together again and then we could read it together. Oh, that's beautiful. Look at that. Yeah, it's like a tassel-y rug. They have a lot of ads in here in the very beginning. And we're not just going to read about that. We can read some other stuff too. So it's a special anniversary issue. 10 years. And they have all kinds of things. They have columns, Due South, Good Hunting, Talk of the South. We're just going to look through here and see what we can find. Oh, that's cool. Cheers to 10 years. Fishy bee. I hope you're having a good night tonight. I'm having a pretty good night. I'm very glad to be here with you. Look at all these ads. Oh my god. Go RVing. And then they have letters from the archives. And more ads. We could read this if you like. This is Talk of the South, and it's about Alison Krauss, which is, I'll tell you honestly, I am not really a country music fan, so I've heard the name, but honestly I don't know anything about her. But we can read it if you'd like. This is Alison Krauss, and this is Talk of the South. First Fiddle. Alison Krauss returns with an ode to the voices of country's past. Here she is. Alison Krauss. Alison Krauss opens the door to her modest Nashville bungalow with her white iPhone sandwiched between her shoulder and ear. She's wearing faded blue jeans, a navy and red pattern knee-length jacket, and some fabulous maroon velvet wedge sneakers with 4 straps. She ushers me in with a quick smile before disappearing into the kitchen to finish her call. It's a frigid day with snow in the forecast, complicating her plan to drive to Birmingham to sing backup at a show by the outlaw country star and her good friend Jamie Johnson. The heat is running full blast in the house Krauss has lived in for almost 15 years, a cozy space with worn hardwood floors and soft earth tones on the walls. Several paintings hang in the living room, including a large landscape of trees and pieces by her grandmother, who worked as an artist for the Marshall Fields department store in Chicago. Her mother painted as well, but Krauss didn't inherit that particular gene. "I'm a watcher, not a painter," she quips. What you won't find displayed, however, are any of the 45-year-old's 27 Grammys, the most by any female artist, and tied with Quincy Jones for the second most of all time. In the 1990s, her work with her band Union Station and her solo efforts, as well as her contributions to the 2000 soundtrack of the Coen brothers' film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, helped bluegrass reach startling new heights. The soundtrack would go on to sell more than 8 million copies and win a Grammy for Album of the Year. Such celebrity can be overwhelming, and Krauss has remained steadfast in her desire to keep her work outside of the home. There doesn't seem to be a hint of shine or ego. "My mother says the reward for hard work is hard work," she says matter-of-factly. And that's the truth. It's satisfying to finish something and feel like it's the best you can do. There's room on the couch, but Krauss sits on an ottoman, almost squatting, her elbows on her knees, with her high school-age son Sam's guitar in front of her. Sam is going through a Def Leppard phase, which is perhaps not surprising given Krauss's long-professed love of heavy metal, especially AC/DC. "My brother and I would turn the amps on so loud," she says, and and then we'd get a long cord and take the guitars outside and stand in the yard. For Krauss, inspiration can come from all quarters, whether she's listening to the buzzing guitar of AC/DC's Angus Young or staring at one of her mother's paintings. When I get drawn to a song, it's the pictures I see, she says. The story itself comes alive, and you don't even make it up yourself. It's a fascinating process. Pictures, in fact, played a role in the development of Krauss's latest, Windy City, her first new release since 2011's Paper Airplane, and her first solo album since 1999, one that had been gestating as Krauss struggled with migraines as well as episodic bouts of dysphonia, a condition in which the throat tightens up. Not a great condition for a singer, she laments. But during a stay in London several years ago, she happened upon a photo book by the fashion photographer Bob Richardson. The pictures of models were taken in the 1960s, and while there was certain beauty to them, Krauss was entranced by their mood and the feelings she got from the subjects. She kept thinking about the images and finally became inspired to begin the process of making another album, drawn toward classic country and bluegrass songs with as much atmosphere as melody. It sounds more cosmic than it is, she says. Some people like to watch a movie 50 times because of the feeling it gives them. I'm kind of that way with photos. For help in selecting just the right tracks, she enlisted Buddy Cannon, a renowned Nashville producer, who has worked with some of the biggest names in country, from Kenny Chesney to Willie Nelson. Krauss and Cannon would sit in his office sifting through potential songs, and she eventually put the original versions on a CD she would listen to while driving around town. As they made their selections, it became apparent that there was a thread running through each track, one of tremendous loss and heartbreak, but also strength, a resilience against falling into despair. It wasn't conscious at the time, she says. You find things that you like, that you're drawn to, and then at the end you're like, oh, here's a theme. All Alone Am I, originally popularized by Brenda Lee, is as close to a torch song as Krauss has ever done, accompanied by a mournful piano, steel guitar, and sweeping strings. Her version of Willie Nelson's I Never Cared for You trades Nelson's stark sound for something more lush, with Krauss's honeyed soprano backed by Suzanne and Sidney Cox of the gospel-steeped Cox Family Band, whom Krauss considers to be her closest friends. She has an amazing talent for finding great songs, says Suzanne. It's a real gift. She kept the theme to herself, but she knew what she wanted, and I've always wanted her to make a whole album of country songs. But the two highlights, Windy City and It's Goodbye and So Long to You, were both recorded by the Osborne Brothers, a 1960s and 70s bluegrass group and one of the genre's most adventurous duos. They're slick, magical, and high, but mysterious, Krauss says. And there's a certain joy to it that, let's say, the Stanley Brothers don't have. The album's title track spins the tale of two lovers who trade their innocence for the temptations of living in the city, while It's Goodbye and So Long to You becomes a joyous Mardi Gras-style romp of blaring horns and rollicking piano, with backup vocals from none other than Hank Williams Jr. Krauss had never met him before recording the track, but his distinct low-end rumble was exactly what she was looking for. You really hear his personality, she says. It's a beautiful contrast. Williams's voice was also a nostalgic touchstone for Krauss, reminding her of singers she would hear while wandering around the Champaign County Fair when she was growing up in Illinois. There's something about Hank and those trumpets, she says. It just reminded me of that time. Outside, the daylight is rapidly fading, and some stray snowflakes begin to do a loopy dance in the wind. Krauss is unsure about plans to play any live shows with the Windy City material, but divulges that she has a batch of new songs she keeps in a blue folder on her desk across the room from where she sits. They'll most likely be for a new Union Station record, but she'll know it when she feels it. It's a recognizable moment, she says, when you know that you've found the thing that you're going to do next as far as work goes. I call it work. Whatever anybody wants to call it, I call it work. You have to chase it. And that's the end of that. Sounds like a very interesting lady. Oh my goodness, look at that. Fried fish. Catfish. have some recipes as well. Look at that. Now, if you like fried fish, that looks delicious. Frequent fryer. The only thing better than Dwayne Nutter's classic cornmeal catfish is the whiskey spiked tartar sauce he pairs with it. Dwayne Nutter thinks frying seafood is a skill every Southern cook should master. They'll let you slide if you can't make a biscuit, but if you mess up the fish, they're like, "Dude, are you from New York?" says the chef, who plans to open seafood-centric Southern National with restaurateur Reggie Washington in downtown Mobile, Alabama this April. Nutter spent nearly a decade as executive chef of the well-regarded One Flew South in Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, and prior to that, cooked in such prestigious kitchens as those at the Four Seasons in Atlanta and the Ritz-Carlton in Palm Beach. But he learned his way with fried fish at home in Morgan City, Louisiana. Almost every Friday, his mother, Rosalind, or his Uncle Bob would fry fish or shrimp someone had caught nearby and brought to the house. "I didn't even know you had to pay for seafood when I was a kid," he said. The list of fish Nutter grew up eating is long: snapper, flounder, speckled trout, perch, and gar. Later, when his family moved to Seattle, he came to love cod, halibut, and salmon. But catfish holds a special place. If there were ever a fish that can have a terrier, it would be the humble catfish, he says. Bad catfish can be mushy and taste metallic. Good catfish is sweet with firm, flaky flesh. It may be the only fish that makes me sound like I'm talking about wine, he says. To make the most of it, he sidesteps the messiness of a heavy, wet batter in favor of his Uncle Bob's highly seasoned, dry cornmeal mix, which clings lightly to the fish. His pro-frying tips: make sure the oil is hot by dropping a little cornmeal into the pan. It should immediately bubble up with some attitude. Never crowd the pan, and adjust the heat to keep the oil temperature even. Because cast iron holds heat so well, odds are the oil will get too hot. Don't mess with the fish once it starts frying, and give it a minute to drain after cooking, either on a wire rack over a sheet pan or, as Nutter used to do as a child, on a brown paper bag. Although his recipe for fish is based on a lifetime of experience, Nutter likes to dress it up with something he invented one night when he was frying pieces of trout belly and tail for his staff's meal: whiskey tartar sauce. He had just mixed up his regular version with plenty of pickle and fresh herbs when he noticed a nearly empty bottle of bourbon. He stirred some into the sauce and discovered a new twist on a culinary trope. "I love the little funk that bourbon gave it," he says, "especially the way the liquor played off the sweetness of the pickles. It was one of those accidents that you're glad happened." And here we have a recipe for Uncle Bob's fried catfish. It serves 6 to 10. And for your ingredients, we have this list: about 1½ cups of canola or peanut oil, 1 cup of yellow cornmeal, medium grind, 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of Creole seasoning, 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 1 teaspoon of salt, plus more for seasoning fillets, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, and then 6 to 10 catfish fillets. Preparation: pour no more than 3/4 of an inch of oil into a large, heavy frying pan. Cast iron is best. Heat over medium-high to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, checking temperature with a clip-on thermometer. Alternately, heat oil in a countertop electric deep fryer per manufacturer directions. In a large bowl, whisk together cornmeal, flour, spices, salt, and pepper. Place the mixture in a shallow dish for dredging. While the oil heats, cut the fish into 2 or 3 pieces each, depending on the size of the fillets. Sprinkle each side with salt, and then dredge the cornmeal mixture. When the oil is hot enough that a pinch of cornmeal sizzles when you drop it in, slip the fillets into the oil, cooking in batches. Fry for 1 to 2 minutes per side, turning the fillets gently with a metal spatula and adjusting the heat to maintain an even 350 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. Each piece should take about 2 to 4 minutes total, depending on its thickness. And then you remove the fish from the pan and you set it aside to drain on a paper towel lined plate or a wire rack set over a sheet pan. And then we have the recipe for the whiskey tartar sauce, and this makes 3 cups. For the ingredients, you have 2 cups of Duke's mayonnaise, 1 cup of chopped bread and butter pickles, 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh parsley, 3 tablespoons of chopped green onion, both white and green parts, the juice and zest of 1 lemon, 2 teaspoons of whole grain Dijon mustard, 1 heaping tablespoon of finely chopped garlic, 1 teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, a half a teaspoon of Tabasco sauce, 2 ounces of whiskey, a half a teaspoon of kosher salt, and a half a teaspoon of black pepper. And for the preparation, add all ingredients to a large bowl and whisk until everything is well incorporated. Adjust seasoning by adding salt and pepper if needed. Refrigerate in an airtight container for 2 to 3 weeks. And this is Dwayne Nutter. It's Meet the Chef, Dwayne Nutter. Hometown is Morgan City, Louisiana. Favorite piece of kitchen equipment. I'm a spoon guy. I need large spoons. I can work them like tongs. Why he keeps the music low in his kitchen. I need everybody to hear my silly jokes and remarks. That keeps me going. Oh, this is beautiful. I saw this. Look at this. This is actually made. This is beautiful. This guy here, Chris Maynard, he will take a bird feather and he coats the back with kind of like an adhesive, and then with like a little X-Acto knife, he very carefully cuts away sections of the feather. And look at that. He made all these beautiful birds. Isn't that gorgeous? Let me read this for you. This is cool. I read this out by the pool the other day. This is so pretty. Okay, now this is the arts section here. And I've never seen anybody do anything like that. That has got to be so, I don't have the patience to do that. And here's some more stuff that he made out of feathers. Birds from a feather. Shadowbox artist Chris Maynard captures beauty on the wing in miniature. There's a fetching duality in the nature of a feather. Singly, a feather seems fragile and weightless. En masse, sheathing the body of a bird, feathers are capable of carrying a living creature to soaring heights and on epic migratory journeys. These contradictions feed the artistic expression of Chris Maynard, who uses wee bits of deconstructed quills, barbs, and veins to create exquisite shadow boxes, scenes that render the energy of avian flight. Wielding scalpels, tiny scissors, and forceps from the finely detailed world of ophthalmologic surgery, the Washington State native transforms the delicate elements into grouse chicks following a hen, a kingfisher hovering over a fish-filled stream, owls with wings spread in that split second before a mouse is a meal, a flock of dunlins carved from turkey plumes. Maynard's skillful, singular works have drawn attention and commissions from galleries and collectors across the globe, from a hotel in London to a show in Shanghai. He travels to the South, too, to display pieces specially crafted for the Southeastern Wildlife Exposition in Charleston, South Carolina, and the Plantation Wildlife Arts Festival in Thomasville, Georgia. Not bad for a river hydrologist. Maynard laughs at the seeming incongruities. I have no formal education in art, he admits. His mother was a professional artist who once taught art history, he says. And I remember going through her old art history books, like any 13-year-old, looking for the naked pictures. Educated as a biologist, Maynard, who is 62, spent his career working on Columbia River water flows and their effects on endangered salmon of the Pacific Northwest. But his mother's influence went beyond racy textbooks. One of her primary interests was Japanese sumi-e painting, in which each brushstroke carries great texture and detail. She would paint a bird with just a few strokes of the brush, Maynard recalls. Very simple and elegant. That made a big impact. After his mother died in 2008, Maynard realized how much art had been a part of his life, and as had a childhood-born love of feathers. He even made a feather lamp for his sister as a teen. He started using the intriguing, if unusual, medium professionally in 2010 and went full-time 3 years later. Employing materials from private aviaries and zoos, it is legal to use wild feathers such as grouse and quail in only a very few instances, he says. Maynard first carefully adheres a special backing to the underside of the specimen. He then draws the design, replicates it on a computer, prints out the template, and transfers it to the feather, fine-tuning by pen. From there, it's a matter of a very steady hand, cutting and removing tiny slices to produce these stirring tributes to bird life. They look like they're flying. And on each bird you can see the little spots from the feathers. As to why his pieces seem to affect people so deeply, Maynard has a few ideas. His art puts birds right up in front of people, he says, up close, in ways that help them see birds in a different way. Bird behavior, even certain songs and calls, also influences the design. It's subtle, but fostering that appreciation for the natural world is a big part of my art, he says. As an artist, I can't really capture life, so I have to try to capture its essence. That essence moves fans in different ways. Folks in large cities, Maynard says, tend to respond to shadow boxes featuring more nondescript birds, like swallows. They recognize them as birds, but mostly they are drawn to ideas like flight. In rural areas and throughout the South, however, something else is going on. Hunters and birders are often more interested in works that show a flock of turkeys or a covey of quail, he reports. These folks are out there day after day. They understand how birds interact with each other. So it's just beautiful. I can't imagine how long it would take to do that. That's just gorgeous. Oh, look at that pretty bracelet. That's gorgeous. International Sporting Weekend. Greenville, South Carolina. I've spent some time there. Nice place. Dog stars. Pretty dogs. My goodness, look at that. Louisiana. Look at that gorgeous cake. Good hunting. Life of the party. In honor of our 10th anniversary, we bring you the ultimate guide to celebrating in style. From a seersucker tux that beats the heat to a cake for the memory books. That's beautiful. The top tier. Maggie Austin of Maggie Austin Cake elevates desserts to high art in her Maryland studio. She turns sugar, butter, and flour into edible sculptures, like this Confederate jasmine wreathed and magnolia crowned confection she dreamed up exclusively for Garden and Gun. Austin welcomes custom commissions. Past clients include everyone from politicos to royals. From $8,000, MaggieAustinCake.com. That's beautiful. Oh, look at that. That's pretty cufflinks. All in the wrist. 18-karat gold intricately woven knot cufflinks by Tiffany & Company are a fail-safe addition to a gentleman's black tie ensemble and a great gift any time of year. $2,700. Take cover. Don't get caught in a downpour without an umbrella fit for a dressy night out, like this sharp paisley and stripe design from Georgia's Bel Tempo umbrella, $180. Paper panache. This exquisitely rendered gardenia boutonniere wasn't plucked from the garden. It was crafted from vintage crepe paper by New Orleans artisan Suzanne Sterling. $50 from SuzanneSterling.com. High Shine. Patent leather lace-ups get a youthful makeover with designer David Hart's version for Johnston & Murphy. The material is classic. The sleek shape is firmly 2017. $295. Oh, look at those beautiful shoes. Oh my God. Those are gorgeous. Well, let's see. Just for kicks. A smattering of pearls set in glamorous brass render these embellished suede heels by Stuart Weitzman stylish from every possible angle. $455. And that's beautiful. Case study. Flecked with subtle bits of gold. Lafshar's Marbled resin box clutch conceals lipstick, cards, and a cache in beautiful fashion. Minimalism done right, $775. I can't afford this page. This one thing I love about this magazine is the beautiful pictures in there. Look at that. That's so lovely. I see so many things that I would love to adopt in my new home. Maybe transform the backyard. They had a story here about Jimmy Johnson, and honestly, I'm not a racing fan either. Greensboro, Georgia. Naughty by Nature. Let's read about this dog. Good Dog by Wright Thompson. Naughty by Nature, a skeptic's look at just what makes a bad dog good. I was against the dog from the beginning. My little brother had made a successful case despite my objections. A tiny emotional manipulator, he had played to my dad's innermost baby boomer insecurities by saying, "We can't be an all-American family without a dog." So we got one, like immediately. We went to a breeder and came home with Braddock, whom my brother named after a Chuck Norris character. We should have shopped around. He was a bad, bad dog. Technically, Braddock was a golden retriever, although we ended up calling him a golden because he never retrieved a thing, unless headless Barbies from the local Catholic schoolyard count. He grinned like a serial killer, his face contorting into a smile that looked eerily similar to Jack Nicholson's, and crabbed through the world like a dog made out of spare parts, his back end never really lining up with his front. He shed so much that my dad used to joke that we could sweep under the radiators and build a second, entirely new, probably better dog. And he gave us all fleas so many times that we were forced to move out of our house for 3 days so the pest people could bomb it. We called him Brad, or the Brewster, but sometimes we used a word with 12 letters. My uncle, whose hunting dogs all attended some fancy dog college in Virginia, and who as a young man had taught his black lab to stand on its hind legs at fraternity parties and do the cool jerk, just called him the worst dog in the history of the world. I agreed. As a teenager about to drive, I had better things to do than to take care of Braddock, and so I gloated as each new dog-related fiasco unfolded. Like the time he stopped eating. We still laugh at how he even refused a plate of Mom's cookies. Only thousands of dollars of exploratory surgery discovered the problem. He'd gone into a town dumpster and eaten a ham, plastic netting and all. The vet kept him on an IV for a week or 2, my dad just shaking his head at how this terrible, terrible dog got whatever he wanted while we paid the price. He ran off all the time, opening the front door of our house by bringing his paw down hard on the lever. Food wasn't the only reason he sought out the back alleys of Clarksdale, Mississippi. Like a professional athlete or a touring musician, he loved random couplings with a constantly changing cast of whatever willing partners he happened to come across. So much so that it almost ruined our family vacation one year. We were readying the car to drive to Destin, Florida for a long-planned trip, one my father desperately needed, when we discovered that Braddock was missing. Mom couldn't stop crying. She didn't want to leave without knowing he was safe, so my dad, rather than see his brake go up in smoke, went to the extreme. He would hire a private investigator who worked for his law firm to find the dog, he promised, if she would agree to get on the road. She said yes, reluctantly. The poor detective hit all the usual places, using his knowledge of cheating spouses, we joked, and finally found our sweet Brad shacked up on the other side of town. On another such jaunt, Braddock didn't come home for 4 days, and so my mom went looking. That time she found him in an alley behind the Sherwin-Williams paint store. After procuring bologna, she parked and got down on her stomach and tried to lure the Brewster toward the car, away from his dog of the night. He refused. Mom was heartbroken. Some things are stronger than bologna, my dad explained. But she couldn't help but worry about him on these escapades. After all, that crazy dog had shown the same devotion to her. He positioned himself between her and strangers instinctively, his crazy Manson eyes working to let folks know he was not a canine to be messed with. You know how you never ever want to fight a skinny redneck? Brad gave off that same vibe, and somehow he knew just when to butter her up. I wasn't home for the following stunt, but my mom and brother swear it happened. Braddock liked to roll around in the sewage-infested creek behind our house and then track mud inside. After one creek bath, he came in and someone scolded him, so he went upstairs, fetched a towel hanging off a banister, dragged it to the fireplace, and sat down on it, as my family looked on, stunned. Begrudgingly, I began to respect this obvious emotional intelligence. Unlikely as it seemed, the world's worst dog was also one of the smartest. Whenever anyone felt sad or lonely, Braddock felt it too. In the aftermath of a family tragedy, and with my dad recovering from open-heart surgery, my mom sat up late for weeks on end, trying to grade papers and keep up with what seemed like a world barely hanging together. One night, when things felt especially fragile, Brad came and sat by her on the couch. He nuzzled his goofy head next to her and then, God is my witness, put his paw on her shoulder and patted it. So I found myself not caring so much about the tracked mud or fleas or philandering walkabouts. Our family carries at its core that fiercely clannish Scotch-Irish thing, the kind of loyalty that causes people to go to war to avenge one of their own. In that regard, Braddock belonged. He'd proved himself worthy of the last name Thompson. Then, post-college, I was home after a bad breakup, and in particular need of comfort when he came and slept by my bed. That did it. I would never be a dog person, except for one, bless his heart, the glorious idiot, dumbass, wonderful Brad. He'd gone from being so bad he bonded us, in opposition to his chaos, to being so essential that everyone in the house doted over him when he got sick and started to slip. The day the doctor called to deliver the news that Braddock's time was up, I went with my dad to the vet. I still remember driving over the railroad tracks to the office, a familiar rumble Braddock always recognized as a sign he was going to be boarded, which he hated. Instead, we brought his body home, and my dad carried Braddock to the backyard wrapped in a white sheet and gently placed him on the ground. There, between the creek where Brad found years of mud and the house where he tracked it, my father dug a hole and then filled it back up again. Now I keep his red collar in my office, touching it sometimes, to remember not just the worst, best dog ever, but also the time when he lived with us, a world gone and buried just as surely as he is. That's a sweet story. Oh, look at that beach. The awesome opossum. That's a long one. Let's see. I think I'm going to renew my subscription. It's actually about to run out. I might renew it. I enjoy reading it, and then when I get done, I give them to my mom. She loves to read. She'll read anything. My mom always said, read anything you can get your hands on. Don't worry about what it is or how highfalutin it is. Just read, read, read. I try to do that when I can. Look at that. Is that an old Econoline? That's an old Dodge truck. That's beautiful. Look at that. My dad used to be a gunsmith. I grew up around guns. All different kinds. I'm going to get over to the story about steel magnolias. So you can get 1 year, you get 6 issues for $20. That's not bad. It's a lot cheaper than buying it on the newsstand. I think they're about $7 a piece. Oh, look at that. They're pretty. Look at that color. It's gorgeous. Savannah's Moment. We're getting there. Look at that Spanish moss. I have enough of these things in here. Here we go. See, I marked it so I can find it again. Look at the caricature. The caricature of the people. Before Dolly, excuse me. My allergies are driving me crazy. I have had a frog in my throat all day. I'm sorry. I have to keep clearing my throat. Before Dolly, Julia, and Sally made Robert Harling's Steel Magnolias a worldwide phenomenon, the play debuted in a small theater off-Broadway to instant success. 3 decades later, Harling and Friends reveal the untold story of what would become one of the most beloved touchstones of Southern culture. 30 Years of Wonderful by Julia Reed. This year marks the 30th anniversary of Steel Magnolias, a play Robert Harling wrote just months after his sister Susan died of complications from diabetes. Written as a tribute to the strength of his sister, his mother, and the coterie of women who supported them, the work broke records at the Lucille Lortel Theater in Manhattan, where it ran almost 3 years. It has since been performed in dozens of countries, including Sweden, South Africa, India, South Korea, and Japan. Less than a year into the play's run, the legendary producer Ray Stark bought the film rights, and in 1988 it was made into a movie starring Sally Field and Julia Roberts as the mother-daughter characters Malin and Shelby. Harling, who grew up in Natchitoches, Louisiana, did not set out to be a playwright. While a student at Tulane University Law School in New Orleans, he sang with a big band and performed in summer community theater. When he graduated, he chose acting over lawyering. He didn't even pick up his diploma, says his dad, Bob Harling, and moved to Manhattan with the promise of a month or two of support from his parents. He arrived in 1977 without a coat in the middle of a snowstorm. I cried for an afternoon, he says, and then I got the list of auditions. He had some success in regional theater and was cast in lots of commercials. His agent told him he had a great food face, meaning he was photogenic even while eating. Then, 8 years after his arrival, his beloved younger sister Susan, who had been a diabetic since she was 12, got sick. Harling's mother donated one of her kidneys, but in the end, the transplant couldn't save her daughter. Robert Harling. Susan was incredibly supportive after I came to New York. She was familiar with my frustration in terms of auditions, and she used to say, "You know what really makes me mad is the fact that I can't do anything for you. I can make food for Johnny, Harling's younger brother. I can whip Mama and Daddy into line, but I don't know how to help you, and I wish I could." Even when she was sick, she'd come home from the hospital and make a box of brownies and send them to me. Everything they talk about in the play is true. Not every diabetic is the same, but because of her particular condition, the doctors were concerned that carrying a child would affect her. But she wanted a child, and she went ahead and had a child, and then sure enough, her metabolism started to fail. Circulatory system, kidneys, the whole thing. It was much grimmer than I portray in the play. Nobody could sit through the actual health dilemmas that my sister went through. It was so powerful to me because here was this incredibly strong woman, my mother, who had really fought Susan when she said she was going to try to have a baby. And now here was Susan having to turn her back to her and say, "Mama, you need to help me now." When she needed a kidney, we were all tested to see if we were matches, but my mom basically said the buck stops here, and that's how it was. The last time I talked to Susan was on her birthday, October 7th, 1985. She was on dialysis, and they were going to put in some shunts to facilitate it, and that required some minor surgery. I actually had to get off the call because I was going to an audition. She said, "Good luck," and they rolled her to the operating room. She never woke up, and I told her story. Harlan says he went to a place of rage and anger, a state exacerbated by the fact that his sister's widower remarried shortly after her death. Even more difficult was the fact that his nephew began calling his stepmother Mama. Harling was afraid Susan would be forgotten. Robert Harling. I had 2 dear friends, Kathy and Michael Weller. Michael is a wonderful playwright who wrote Moonchildren and Spoils of War. They saw what I was going through, and Michael suggested I write something. Such a saga of strength and tolerance had gone on, and I kept saying, this kid won't know anything about it. I wasn't a writer, so I fought that demon for a while, and then one day I said, why not? I'd planned to write a short story, and I was a couple of pages into it when I realized I wasn't capturing the way these women talked. So I started writing in dialogue form. When I was a kid, the mystique of the beauty parlor was that guys were never allowed. You didn't know what went on in there, and they all came back different somehow. I realized this hermetically sealed environment would be the best place to have these women express their true feelings. After my sister's funeral, everybody came over to the house, and there was all this food. I was watching the men in the den, and they were a mess. My dad couldn't talk about anything. None of them knew what to do. And I could see into the kitchen, and there were all these women, and they were laughing and telling stories and dishing things out. They were saying things like, this would be a lot better if she had just put a little white pepper in it. And I thought, this is very interesting. The women are getting it done, and the guys cannot function. And then one of the men walked into the kitchen, and I saw how the women's body language completely changed. They weren't leaning against the counter anymore. The dish towel that was slung over her shoulder was all of a sudden being folded and hung up on the rack. Later I thought, this play needs to be somewhere there can be no men, which was, of course, the beauty parlor, and I started putting the characters together. Harlan didn't want to use real names, so he gave the character based on his mother the name of a close friend from Alabama who was called Malin. After a search through a family tree, Susan became Shelby after one of his mother's cousins. It's that southern thing of using a family name as a first name, Harlan says. Clary came from a fabulous aunt in South Carolina, and his sister's best friend was named Weezer. She in no way resembled the character, he says, but there was just something about the name that fit. Robert Harling. All the characters were based on real people, Mama's friends. I've never told a living soul who Weezer's based on. After the play had some success and everybody from Natchitoches went up to New York to see it, I was really worried because Weezer's such a crotchety old curmudgeon. And lo and behold, every woman in town was saying, he based Weezer on me. Harlan says the name Annelle just came to him one day. It's so southern to take two first names and just jam them together. And then there was Truvy, the operator of the salon. Robert Harling. I knew the actress Margot Martindale, who is now a huge star, and I wrote the role of Truvy for her. At the time, Margot was a working actress from Jacksonville, Texas, and she had this incredible voice. I wanted a name that fit her. I thought, since people come into the salon to tell the truth, there's something about Truvy. It sounds like something her granddaddy might have called her as a kid. She loved it. Margot Martindale. Bobby and I were introduced by our commercial agent, and it was instant love. From the moment we met, he tailor-made the part for me. At the early stages of readings, I was attached, and when the play was finally produced, it came with me. Robert Harlan. So I put these 10 characters in a beauty shop, and it only took me 10 days to write it. When I finished the play, I took it to the receptionist at a literary agency, and she gave it to one of the agents. The feedback was, it's not commercial because it's a bunch of women and it takes place in a beauty parlor, but we'll send it out. Well, all these people wanted to do it. We did a reading of it at a small off-Broadway theater, the WPA, which had an amazing reputation. Little Shop of Horrors started there. And there was an equally amazing director, Pamela Berlin, who totally got it. She would tell me things like, you've only allowed 1 minute and 15 seconds to wash and set a woman's hair. You have to move the dialogue around so we have time to do these things. Margot Martindale. I tried to quit several times during rehearsals because the actresses would piss me off saying, oh, you've got to roll my hair like this. Don't do that. I said, I'm playing a hairdresser. I'm not a hairdresser. I'm leaving. Thank God it didn't stick. Robert Harling. Margot's hometown is just over the border from Natchitoches, so it's kind of the same world. All I'd have to do was listen to her read the lines to realize when things were too verbose. Also, I had the voices of the women I grew up with. It takes your breath away how quick they are. It's the kind of humor that would sear through treacle. The default was not to break down. The default was to change the conversation or lift it somehow. Margot Martindale. But we played it like a drama. We all thought it was a drama. And then the first night it was in front of an audience, we were shocked. It was riotously funny and played straight as an arrow.
It was never like any of us thought we were doing jokes. We thought we were just talking like the people from that part of the country talk. Robert Harling. It's like the line, there is no such thing as natural beauty. That was something somebody who sold makeup in Natchitoches. That was something somebody said who sold makeup in Natchitoches. That was a statement, not a joke. But when you put it in a theatrical situation, people respond to the honesty of it. As the years have gone by, there are a lot of lines that get quoted back to me. There's a moment when Weezer had just had a tirade about how she hates kids and people are parking on her lawn, and she's really spewing anger, and Malin says, "Well, Weezer, if that's really the way you feel, you should come down to the Mental Guidance Center and talk to somebody. We're there to help." We were in previews, and the actress who played Weezer, Mary Fogarty, God bless her, came to me and said, "I need to say something. I'm the meanest woman in town, and you hurl the biggest insult so far to me, and I'm going to say something." I'd written no line there. I said, "Okay, say, I'm not crazy. I've just been in a very bad mood for 40 years. She wrote it on her hand. We were literally going into performance, so Pam and I are standing in the back, and Malin says her line, and then Mary, kind of glancing at her hand, said, "I'm not crazy." The house detonated. It stopped the show. Harlan did not tell his parents he had written the play until just before it opened at the WPA, but he'd sent versions back and forth to his brother John, who was working in Philadelphia. Robert Harling. As we were going into production, Michael and Kathy Weller asked me what my parents thought about the play, and I said I hadn't told them. It was the only time I'd ever seen Kathy get riled at me. I said, "It's got to be a painful thing for them. We'll do the play. It'll come and go, and they won't know anything about it." I was just chicken. Kathy said, "You weren't there through all of that pain. You didn't watch your child die. If there's one moment of joy to be gained out of this experience, you cannot deny them that. If you don't tell them, I will." They came to New York to visit a week before we went into rehearsal, and I got up some courage. They were just flummoxed. I wasn't a writer. When Mama asked me if she could read it, I said, "You don't want to. It's about you and Susan and the whole thing." But she's a steel magnolia. She was going to read it. I gave her the script, and I'd walk past, and she'd be sobbing. I felt terrible. Afterward, I said, "Mom, we'll just kill it. I can't put you through this." And she said, "It's wonderful because it's true." She just closed it, and that was it. End of topic. John Harling. Daddy never read it, so he didn't know what the hell was going on. When we sat down in the theater on opening night, I was the most nervous I'd ever been in my life. Mama and Susan locked horns. They were both good, strong Southern women. That's what makes the play so good. But you never know how people are going to react having that kind of personal information up there on stage. So we sit down, and early on, Truvy says, "We're going to be busier than a one-armed paper hanger." I look over at my dad, and everybody's laughing, and he's not laughing, but he's beaming because that's his expression. I could visibly see his chest rise up. From that point on, the cathartic experience of Steel Magnolias started in our family. What people don't understand is that it's honest even below what they see as a story. It's honest all the way down. The play really did work miracles, and I don't use that term lightly. It helped us grieve. We were basically grieving with the world. Bob Harling. I felt happy. I felt sad. I just couldn't believe what was happening, but I was mostly feeling good and proud. It was a memorial to my daughter. Margot Martindale. In the second act, when I talk on the phone to somebody, I would always put in, "See you then, Susan." I think that finally got published in the play. It only ran for 4 weeks at the WPA, and we all wanted to figure out how to keep it going. I put money into it, and Connie Schulman, the actress who played Annelle, did, and Bobby's family did too. We moved the play to the Lucille Lortel. Robert Harling. My father, my uncle, and our next-door neighbor all invested, and I was horrified. You almost always lose money in theater, but there was no stopping them. And then another neighbor told me, "You know, it's not about you, it's about Susan." And I realized that's why they wanted to do it. They weren't looking to make money. They wanted to support the continuation of the saga. Shortly after the play moved, Hollywood came calling with offers for a movie, and every big-name actress turned up at the theater to see if there might be a screen role for her. Robert Harling. Joan Rivers came, Lucille Ball came, Cher, Betty Davis, all of the Golden Girls. It became a nightly thing to see who was the huge star in the audience. Somebody had told Elizabeth Taylor that Malin was the perfect role for her, and when word got out that she was coming, they had to shut the street. I was thinking at the time, Elizabeth Taylor is going to sit here and hear the line, "When it comes to suffering, she's right up there with Elizabeth Taylor." No one laughed harder than she did. It made the nightly news. When the producer, Ray Stark, made an offer to buy the rights, Harlan was thrilled. Stark had made the hit The Way We Were, and the plays he'd made into movies included Funny Girl and Chapter 2. Stark not only understood strong women, he also had a long working relationship with Herbert Ross, with whom he'd done 8 films, including Funny Lady. Ross was hired as director. Robert Harling. Part of the deal was that I would get the first crack at the screenplay. Herbert gave me the greatest, simplest advice. Always remember who the important person is here, meaning my sister. Go back and ask what would amuse her, how she would edit, what would be too vulgar, where she would put her foot down. So we got a draft of the script together, and Ray was happy. Shirley MacLaine. Herbert called and said, "I'm going to send you this script so you can play any part you want except for Malin and the daughter." So I read it and I said, "I want to play the really bitchy one." I think I was rehearsing for my old age. I was seeing if I could get away with saying what I negatively felt and still be funny. And it's kind of turned out that way, actually. Robert Harling. Herbert had his way. He was from Brooklyn and started out as a chorus boy, but he became this acclaimed director and managed to talk like British gentry. So over dinner one night at Orso, the evergreen New York Theater District restaurant, he said, Robert, how would you feel about Sally Field playing your mother?" I couldn't speak. Then he said, "I was thinking that I'd love to see Dolly do Truvy," and I almost choked on my pizza bread. Margot Martindale. I think they actually did see me for the role of Truvy, but that was just a courtesy, and I was not upset that Dolly got the role. Truvy's all about heart, and Dolly Parton has a big heart. Robert Harlan. Just after my dinner with Herbert, Olympia Dukakis won the Oscar for Moonstruck. Ray called and said, "Olympia's doing Clary." I knew Olympia from her work in New York theater, so I knew she could do anything, but I was worried that she wasn't Southern. Shirley's from Virginia, and Sally had done Places in the Heart and Norma Ray, and then of course there's Dolly. But when Olympia came down, all the women in town thought she had the most accurate accent. Next, Herbert said, "I really like Daryl Hannah for..." I thought he was going to the Shelby place, but before he got there, he said a nail. I couldn't imagine it. She was one of the great goddesses of cinema. Hannah had already starred in Splash and Roxanne. Herbert said, "It's a wonderful Hollywood move. She will jump at the chance to wear a bad wig and glasses." All that left was Shelby. We decided on Meg Ryan, who had just had some success with Top Gun. The day we offered it to her, she came back and said, "I just got offered this movie with Billy Crystal, When Harry Met Sally, and that's my chance to be a leading lady. In Steel Magnolias, I'd be part of an ensemble." So we went back to the list. Laura Dern, Winona Ryder, all the hot young stars. Ray said, "You know what? We've got a lot of Oscar winners and stars. Let's open it up." The casting director said, "There's this girl. She hasn't been able to audition because she's been off making some movie about a pizza." Roberts had just finished filming Mystic Pizza. Julia came in, and it was like somebody bumped up the lights. She smiled that smile. She was the essence of the great Southern gal, spicy, witty, smart, with a layer of compassion underneath. Roberts grew up in Smyrna, Georgia. Lee Radziwill, who had just started dating Herbert, said, "She's it. She's Shelby." I thought, okay, I can breathe now. My sister's in good hands. Shirley MacLaine. The moment Julia walked into the reading, I thought, that woman is going to be a star. I called my agent and said, "I don't know if she has an agent, but you should handle her." During the casting, Stark also made the decision the movie would be filmed on location, an extraordinary move at the time. Robert Harling. Ray said, "Why don't we shoot it where it happened?" That was unheard of. Normally you'd find your locations in the Valley and in L.A., but Ray insisted. It helped that Natchitoches is gorgeous. Anywhere you point your camera, you're going to frame a good shot. It's the oldest town in the Louisiana Purchase. It had a sense of history you could never capture in Pasadena. But first, a lot of stuff had to happen. They had to start bringing in all these people and all this equipment to this tiny little place. Finally, the date was set, and we started shooting at the end of June 1988. The circus had come to town. The filming lasted through Labor Day, and all the stars lived in houses in Natchitoches. Tom Whitehead, Natchitoches resident and then member of the Louisiana Film Commission. There was a buzz in the community the whole time the shoot was here. There's a restaurant called Mariners out on Sibley Lake, and every night Dolly, her assistant, the guy who did her hair, and her bodyguard went to dinner there. The restaurant was sold out for the duration. People filled it up to see Dolly Parton eating in the back corner. Robert Harling. Julia was so eager to have the stamp of approval from Mama and Daddy to play their daughter. She'd come over, and Daddy would cook hamburgers, and they'd talk, and she'd write poetry and read us the poetry, and Dolly would come over and sit on the sofa and play her guitar. It was just beyond surreal. Dolly wrote a song called Eagle When She Flies. It was written for the movie, and Herbert was going to play it over the credits, but he changed his mind. There's a line about the sweet magnolia that originally had been Steel Magnolia, and she played it for my parents as she was writing it. Shirley MacLaine. It was really hot. There was Dolly with a waist cincher no more than 16 inches around and heels about 2 feet high, and a wig that must have weighed 23 pounds. And she's the only one who didn't sweat. She never complained about anything. Never. The rest of us were always complaining. Robert Harling. We were shooting part of the Christmas scene, and this was in the dead of August. And we were sitting out on the porch of Truvy's beauty shop. We were waiting, and there was a lot of stop and start. The women were dressed for Christmas, and Dolly was sitting on the swing. She had on that white cashmere sweater with the marabou around the neck, and she was just swinging, cool as a cucumber. Julia said, "Dolly, we're dying, and you never say a word. Why don't you let loose?" Dolly very serenely smiled and said, "When I was young and had nothing, I wanted to be rich and famous, and now I am, so I'm not going to complain about anything." Tom Whitehead. They all lived life locally. Tom Scarrett, who played Shelby's father, rode his bicycle to a restaurant downtown where he ate lunch most days. Robert Harling. Tom Scarrett was 2 houses down from where my father lived, so I had my fake father, Drum, out picking up sticks from a storm in the yard and with his khakis rolled up, and there was my real father in his yard doing the same thing. Olympia lived down the street. Michael Dukakis, Olympia's cousin, was running for president that summer, so Olympia was all involved and spoke at the Democratic convention. It's a very Republican area of the country, but there were some people who put Dukakis signs in their yard just to be neighborly. Shirley MacLaine. I loved studying the townspeople and walking through their lives a little. I'd go to the ice cream store and the magazine place and the video store. I just wanted to see how people acted, how they belonged to themselves. Robert Harling. The L.A. people required things that you didn't find at the local Piggly Wiggly. I remember the manager of the store saying to a local reporter, "Yep, if it hadn't been for Herbert Ross, nobody around here would know the difference between Acetra and Beluga." Shirley MacLaine. We immediately saw that Herbert was cruel to both Dolly and Julia. I don't know why, except he was basically a choreographer, and choreographers tend to be cruel in the name of art. Julia's feelings were hurt, and we lived next door to each other, and she was over every night. We talked about life, and I tried to help her because I was a dancer and understood the choreographer mentality. Then one day I basically told him to go fuck himself, and everybody heard it, and things got better. MacLaine hastens to add that Ross was a good director, and that in some ways the conflict turned out to be a good thing. Shirley MacLaine. We became protective. We became one. We really did make fast friends, all of us, and have been ever since. I don't know what it is about the subject matter in the movie, but going through that makes you friends for life. Robert Harling. I'm still working out the ramifications of this whole insane journey that only art can let you move through. Because what is art other than taking the pieces around you and reforming them into some vision that satisfies you and enriches others? My mom and dad had their own kind of come-to-Jesus moments with all this stuff. But you know, my sister died and I wrote about it, and people look at it and think it's all limos and glamour and sitting next to Princess Di at the royal premiere. My sister had to die for all that to happen. So almost daily I think about what my life would be if she had lived. It could take you to an uncompromisingly dark place sometimes. Then I just have to go back to the honesty of the first impulse, that I just wanted somebody to remember her. Oh, that is so cool. And that is all about steel magnolias. So I learned some stuff I didn't know. That's fascinating. I hope you enjoyed that. And then mainly in the back of this magazine is a lot of ads. I mean, it has some little stories, but it's a lot of ads in the back. In Norfolk, Virginia. Most of the articles in here are pretty short. Oh, look at that beautiful fish. Legoland. My kids want to go there. The Southern Agenda. Tennessee Historical Records. Elvis, Howlin' Wolf, and Johnny Cash all owe at least a portion of their fame to a little studio at 706 Union Avenue in Memphis. We record anything, anywhere, anytime was a motto and a mission statement for producer Sam Phillips, who founded his famed Sun Records label there 65 years ago. The Southern bluesmen and balladeers who flocked to his door from public... Where does it go from there? Oh, housing projects and cotton fields would change music forever, and Phillips would help them. In 1960, the producer moved to a bigger building, but by the end of the 60s, he'd abandoned recording for other business pursuits. The old Union Avenue studio languished semi-abandoned for decades, also serving as a scuba store and a barber shop. The reason it's so preserved today is that it was pretty vacant all those years, says Nina Jones, manager at the restored Sun Studio. We have the same floor tiles they recorded on in 1952. Today you can stop by the shrine to blues and rock and roll for a nearly hour-long tour, but you'll have to clear out by dinner time, since Cash, Carl Perkins, Roy Orbison, and Jerry Lee Lewis resurrected the studio in 1985 with their Class of '55 album. Sun has returned to its roots, serving as a nighttime workspace for such musicians as U2 and Justin Townes Earl. That's cool. I'll read one last thing. End of the Line by Roy Blunt Jr. Fed Up. Why it's hard to break bread with a lizard. I used to love to catch lizards when I was a kid. Take dogs for a long enough walk with off-leash time, and they will come home grinning and wagging. When it comes to feeding dogs, don't expect them to do your heart good. They wolf it down, whatever it is, with grave expressions on their faces, remembering when they were wolves. It's not a fun thing. It's part of an ancient pact. When it comes to feeding animals, I was brought up not to fool around. Still, I am open to new experiences. A neighbor down the street here in New Orleans is a cockatoo named Iko. She hangs out on the inside of an iron mesh gate and will talk to you. Hello, Iko, and sometimes a wistful sounding bye-bye when you have turned to leave. Once when I was too slow slipping $1 into the slot marked Iko tips, I want to say she ate it. What she did was, she snatched it with her beak and nibbled it to bits. Back in the 70s, I lived alone in a New York City apartment, which is no place, in my view, to keep a dog, and I was traveling a lot. An ideal self-sustaining pet for city dwellers, I read somewhere, was a gecko, a lizard that, if you gave it free rein, would stay behind your refrigerator by day and fatten itself by night on roaches. A friend of mine back home wouldn't even say the word, called them R's. The day I surprised multiple roaches in my toaster, I called a pet shop. I know pet shop animals are generally overbred, but a lizard? On the phone, I understood the pet shop man to say, "Oh, yes, we have gecko." In fact, there being some language barrier, he had understood me to ask for a cat go, a brand of kitty litter. The only lizard in stock was nearly 1.5 feet long. It had fin-like crests on its head all the way down its back and tail. A basilisk lizard. A basilisk was an ancient creature in Greek and Roman mythology that combined elements of rooster, snake, and lion. But this lizard didn't look all that monstrous. And back then I had a more colorful lifestyle than I do today. "Will he eat roaches?" I asked. "Eat anything, especially roaches." I brought him home and named him Basil. He would pop up unexpectedly, causing guests to cry out, "What the?" or something stronger. The basilisk lizard is also known as the Jesus Christ lizard because it can run across the top of water. You can see one doing so on YouTube to catch a butterfly. But also for another reason, I would say. Every time he popped up, I liked him more. My roach population, however, was holding steady. I tried attracting roaches into his range with dabs of cottage cheese. Didn't work. I tried killing roaches and bringing them to him. Nope. I offered him scrambled egg, fruit, Vienna sausage. I thought anybody would eat Vienna sausage. Maybe Basil was overbred. Couldn't blame him for that. The trouble with animals, my mother used to say, is you get so attached to them. She may have thought that was the trouble with me too, but at least I ate heartily. The most chilling phrase I can think of in regard to living with things you're responsible for is failure to thrive. That is what it came down to with Basil. While I was off riding a raft through the rainforest of Peru, feeding bits of mango along the way to a marmoset and a macaw, a friend of mine stayed at the apartment and tried to feed Basil, but he died. So no more exotic pets for me. I look for opportunities to feed unusual animals that other people take care of regularly. On the set of a movie I was working on, I fed an actress named Ty. You could hand her a cantaloupe and she would eat it in one chomp, or you could give her a package of M&Ms and she would hold the package down with one foot, tear a corner off with her trunk, shake the M&Ms out, and eat them one by one. When you look up Ty's page on the Internet Movie Database, you find this. Trivia is an elephant. Trivial only in the context of the movie industry. In the right habitat, Basil would have cut a wide swath. Isn't that cute? It's a little between the finger ring. That's cool. Or ladybug. Seems like that would be uncomfortable though. Have to kind of hold it there. And that is the end of the magazine for now. This is Garden and Gun. And I want to thank you for coming to listen to me read. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful night.